I left news, but news never left me. It
Mhm.
influences everything that I do, I think, to this day.
Mm.
Stand by. Is this thing on?
Yes, Dan.
Oh, hello.
You're listening to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
This just in.
Breaking news to report.
We are live.
Old newscasters
Can we just say former?
Sure. Former newscasters reunite behind the mic after more than 20 years.
Old news is good news.
Stay tuned. Kim Dawson has worked in news markets all over the Midwest, including Chicago, Madison, St. Louis, and Milwaukee. After leaving news, Kim went on to be the spokesperson for the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, as well as numerous other marketing, PR, and communications positions in the Milwaukee area. Dan and I worked with Kim on the weekends at WKOW TV in Madison, Wisconsin in the mid 1990s. Kim Dawson-Brooks, welcome to Old News. Yay! Cue
Hi,
the cheering.
guys.
Hi, Kim. It's
Great to
been
see you.
decades since we've seen you last. And we
Thank
all worked very closely on the weekends there for a while and some weekdays as well. But you were our main anchor on the weekends. I started as an intern when I was working with you. When I would go, yeah, I'd go out with you when you were dayside reporting. And I'll just tell you right off the bat, you were such a huge mentor to me, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you. I mean, reporters have their own jobs and they're trying to get the story and they're, working on the quality of their own work and they've got a lot of irons in the fire, but you were always very patient with me as an intern. You always helped me. I never felt like I was bothering you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And then I had the opportunity to work with you on the weekends, and you were my anchor. I was producing for you, and it was just such a joyful time. Dan was reporting at the time on the weekends. You were the anchor. I mean, the three of us were like it for a while.
Oh, thank you. That makes me feel so good. It reminds me of a quote, I think, from Maya Angelou, and she said, people won't something like this. People won't remember necessarily what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. And so, thank you. I don't know how many years later for saying that because, at the end of the day, regardless of what our jobs are, we want to be good people.
Yes, and you are
And
definitely
you
good
guys
people.
are great people.
Oh,
Uh
gee. That's nice of you to say. Now, Kim,
yes.
Carrie, I don't even remember you producing the weekend news, so I feel terrible about that. But because I
Really?
remember, yeah, I remember Kim like doing it all. She was like producing and anchoring and probably sometimes going out and reporting on the weekends too when there was other stuff happening that me or whoever else was producing or reporting couldn't get to. So, how
Yeah.
long were you doing that with Kim on the weekends?
I can't well, not that long because
Not that
remember,
long,
wasn't
okay.
Daniel, his name is Daniel, who was
Dan
producing.
Berman, yeah.
Yes, Dan Berman. And then I was just kind of helping out. I was an extra body on the weekends. And then he went on to another market. And so it was like, oh, look around. Who's here? Who could Carrie, you want to produce the weekends? I
Right.
was like, sure. So I did 6 and 10 on Saturday and 10 on Sunday before I moved to morning news cut-ins. I think that was the order
Got
of
it.
things. But
And
yeah.
then Kim, did they get you another producer then after after Carrie left, or were
Well,
you just
yeah.
doing
Do
it on your
you
own?
remember Natasha? Was a
Boy, I don't.
producer there. She was from
Mm.
New York
Oh, I do
Mm.
remember
and
Natasha.
produced
That's
for a
right.
while.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah,
there were
it's
plenty of
been
days I
forever
think when
since
you
I've spoken with her too.
but there were times when you were doing it all, weren't there?
Um, yeah, I mean, and that's what made that experience so valuable
Mhm.
Yeah.
is, you do it all, you understand it all. So when you get that producer, you are a better anchor
Mhm.
because of it.
Right. When you understand all the pieces, it's much harder to be a diva on the anchor desk, right? Because you're like, no, I get it. I've called the shots in the back with the headphones on. I've done all the things. Yeah, you have a lot more empathy for the whole process.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So where did you start in TV then, Kim? What was your first TV gig?
It's fun. I have a great story. So when I finished college, I went to Howard University, and when I finished
Yep.
college, I was I'm from Chicago, so I was in Chicago sending out resumes, nothing, right? And they were those big 3/4 inch
Mhm.
tapes that you would send, and I would keep getting no, 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 no.
Mhm.
And eventually my parents were like, you know what, that's great. You want to be a reporter, but you're gonna have to go get a job.
Mhm.
And okay, fine. Don't give up on your dream, but you're gonna have to get a job until something hits.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to work at the Gap because I had a friend working at the Gap at Water Tower Place.
Who
And my
really didn't want to work everybody wanted to work at the Gap.
I
right,
know that was like the cool place then. Yeah.
exactly. And my mom was like, if I were you, I would work somewhere interesting. Um, where you'll see, just really interesting people. I'd work at, like Saks Fifth Avenue or Neiman Marcus. Okay.
Mhm.
So fast forward the story, I got a job working selling jewelry at Neiman Marcus. I was selling David Yurman jewelry. And one
Whoa.
day, this gentleman came in with an entourage, and everybody was like going for him, trying to get that sale. And I was like, who's that?
Huh?
They said, "That's Joe Ahern, the general manager of WLS TV in Chicago." I
Oh.
was like, "Oh," something hit. I said, "I have to speak to him. I don't know what I'm gonna say," and I was quaking in my boots, but I said, "I have to say something." So I just introduced myself to him and, told him I was just a recent college graduate looking to get experience, blah, blah, blah. So that night I went home and I typed a letter. Dear Mr. Ahern, it was really nice meeting you. By the way, I hope your wife enjoys her birthday gift, blah, blah, blah. I'm a recent college graduate. I have experience doing X, Y, and Z. I put it in an envelope. I took the bus to work the next day, but I dropped it off and left it with the doorman on State Street at the Chicago studio.
Right.
I would say
Yeah.
by 2 o'clock that afternoon, my parents said, you got a call from Mr. Ahern. I called him. He said, young lady, you get a gold star for ambition.
Wow.
I went to go meet with him, and then I would say maybe 4 weeks later, I got my first job at WLS TV in Chicago.
That is
Um,
awesome.
Yeah. And I tell that story to my kids and to young people who are trying to break in the business, regardless of what industry, you never know where
Mhm.
opportunity is going to happen. So always be on the lookout for ways you can meet people that can perhaps help you get where you want to go.
That's
I
a
went
great
to
story.
I went to WBBM in Chicago, and then my first on-air job was this tiny little town, KFVS TV in Cape Girardeau, Missouri,
Oh
about
yeah.
2 hours south of St. Louis, and it was like an incredible experience, one that I hold so dearly. Um
So at a tiny station like that, what was your day-to-day work like?
I did have a photographer that I worked with, and I could be in, well, you know what? They were experiencing the worst flooding there in
Mm.
500 years. And
Whoa.
so I can remember boating over the roofs of people's
Oh
homes and
my gosh.
seeing cattle floating in the water. It was an incredible experience. It was definitely an agricultural town,
Mhm.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and very different, for this. big city girl.
Oh my goodness.
Um,
Yeah.
but
But great stories for the resume tape, right?
absolutely. So I covered everything from farms to murders because
Hmm.
that was there too.
Hmm.
Um, and I was there for about 2 years, and then, or maybe 3 years, and then I went to Madison at WKOW as an anchor.
You did a couple of radio gigs first, right? And then you went to the TV gig?
Yeah, never radio,
No,
just
never radio.
TV.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, just straight TV.
So at BBM, you were what were you doing at
Oh,
BBM in
yeah,
Chicago?
so in those positions, I was, a production assistant or desk assistant, both at Ellis
Got it.
and BBM. So I'd be the person that ripped the scripts, or I'd sit on
Yeah.
the assignment desk and listen for breaking news. I'd call, the, police district if there was something happening,
Hmm.
uh, before we would send reporters. So that was a great way to start. What I find very interesting today is that a lot of people are able to start in markets, top markets,
Hmm.
like Milwaukee, for example, without
Really?
having a lot of on-air experience.
Yeah,
So we
that's what
Oh.
I've
started,
heard.
in the small markets and then worked our way up gradually to a
Mm-hmm.
top 20 market.
Hmm.
Nowadays, people are, you know, 1 to 2 years of experience, and boom, they're on air, which is really
Mm.
interesting to see how the industry has changed.
Why
Mm-hmm.
do you think that is that well, I shouldn't say easier, but they're starting in larger markets now, Kim?
That's a great question. I don't know if it's because the salary scale has changed and those $1 million salaries that the big anchors in big cities used to get are far and few between.
Mm.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because technology has changed.
Yeah,
Hmm.
probably a little of both.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, we had on the news on a station we don't normally watch, and my husband just said, "Did that person just graduate from high school?" I said, "I know. It also might be a sign that we're getting older and older when
Right.
they look
There's
younger and
always that.
younger." Yeah, when the doctor walks in, it's like, have you been out of middle school long?"
Right,
So
right.
probably just look at ourselves and go, "Oh."
It's really interesting, and if I'm honest, I have struggled with aging and
Mm,
trying to figure out where I fit in. I'm not in my 60s or
mhm,
70s or anything yet,
mhm,
and I'm still, I think, youthful, vibrant, and having, the desire to contribute a lot to society, to
mhm,
companies. But I don't always see me. Certainly when I look on TV, I don't see a lot of people that worked with us still in
mm,
business. They've
mm,
gone to PR or other
mhm,
industries. And
mhm.
um, I don't know. I don't know if you guys struggle with kind of reinventing yourself in a way to stay relevant, to stay current, and to continue to grow.
Well, we
Well,
definitely talked to other people about that too. And Carrie has a whole bunch of irons in the fire right now that she's been reinventing herself with.
right. When I turned 50 last fall, and it was kind of, I just felt like this is the year of Carrie because my youngest went off to college. And I'm like, Dan, it's time. We're starting the podcast. And then I'm like, I want to start a musical group. So I started a band with somebody else. And so I mean, amongst like my sister and a group of friends from my Les Mills training days, that's a fitness company, we laughed at, that Saturday Night Live, like, I'm 50 and I like to kick. You remember that?
Oh yeah.
That's been my
That's
theme.
Molly
right.
Shannon.
So I'm like, yeah, so it's like, I need that t-shirt because my sister just said, oh, get this t-shirt. I said, I'm running out of time. I'm going to be 51 soon. And she said, just Velcro the zero to I could be like 51. I'm 51 and I like to kick. So I just kind of feel like it's my time now. Nobody's living in the house. I could pursue what I want. So that's how I've been handling the aging thing.
I
How about
do
you?
understand. I was going to say, I understand what you're saying though, because you are constantly, I mean, even when you're in your 40s and in your 30s, sometimes you're in a career path, you're in a career track, and you're kind of working your way through that track, or maybe you're running a business, or you're doing, like you're a consultant. But then when you get into your 50s, sometimes you want something different, right? Life is different. Like Carrie's just talking about, she's in her early 50s. I'm closing in on my 60s now. Um, so early 50s is very different than late 50s. But I think like you and like Carrie, we still feel very relevant and very
Mhm.
healthy, thank goodness. And we still do have things that contribute. So yeah, I mean, I've done different things. I went from video production to real estate to doing talent work to doing a bunch of different things. I kind of like doing a lot of different things.
Same.
I don't have, that great desire anymore to build this career as opposed to do things that I enjoy doing and that I feel like are contributing to society as a whole. Kind of
Mhm.
like you were saying before, you want to do something, that you feel is important and at the same time is helping other people and not just yourself. Yeah, that's important too, but you still want to be doing something for other people too. So that's kind of where I'm at in my life, and I'm fortunate enough to have a wife who is finishing up a very long
Mm.
career in education. And so I've always been able to do some of those other things that I like to do because of uh, the insurance that she provides and a
Mhm.
stable, the stable part of our income as opposed to the ups and downs of being self-employed or, doing other kind of gig economy type of stuff, I guess. So,
Yeah, it is really interesting, because, like you, Carrie, my oldest daughter just finished her first year of college.
Ooh.
Youngest daughter is a sophomore in high school going into her junior year. And it's just me. I've raised my girls, myself for the most part during, their latter years.
Hmm.
And I'm starting to get some of my time back as they
Mhm.
become more independent and kind of think about leaving the nest and,
Mhm.
starting their own journeys. Um,
Mhm.
and I just took a job not that long ago with the Milwaukee County Community Reintegration Center. And
yeah.
it's really a nice fit for me because I do feel like I'm really able to help someone other than myself or my family. We help people who are justice impacted reintegrate back into into society. So
Mm.
we are a correctional facility,
Mhm.
but, our superintendent believes that instead of just sitting around, 24 hours a day, not really doing anything productive, that we have this opportunity to offer um, job training and education and mental health services.
The studies suggest that people who have a support network are less likely to repeat the activity and behavior that brought them here to begin with.
And, then when people return to the community, they can really choose a different course for their lives. And that's ultimately what's going to make communities safer.
How
Yeah.
did you
Talk
get
about
into that
important work.
role?
It's funny. Life I have found is unpredictable. I worked for the sheriff's office for many years here in Milwaukee County as a spokesperson, and
Mhm.
I really felt like, that chapter had closed, but then this opportunity came up and I was just my experience that I'd had before meant that I was able to hit the ground running. And I knew that I could help the superintendent with all of the issues that she was challenged with. And it
Mm.
was just a really good fit and a good opportunity. And it was slightly different from anything that I'd done before. And here I am.
And is that when well, first of all, let's go back for a moment to you were at WKOW for, well, I saw on your LinkedIn, it was only like a little more than 2 years. Is that right?
Yeah, that was right.
I
Uh,
can't believe that. It's like in my mind, in my world, like it was longer than that. But that's kind of what we're finding. It's like even Jamie Glinberg, he's like, yeah, I was only at the station like a year, and we're like, you were? I mean, just because when we're so in the trenches together, I think it's like we get to know each other really quickly, and we have these bonds and the experiences, so it almost feels like it's a longer period of time than it really is.
Yeah, and then for me, I wasn't trying to stay anywhere too long
Mm,
because I was always on that big city track. So
mhm,
this was a time where you had to again work your way up. And so
mhm,
Yep.
I was trying to get to the next biggest market. I wasn't trying to stay in Madison very long. I was trying to get the experience, get the skill, and as soon as I was ready, boom, I was
mm,
going to the next size market. And in that case, for me, it was St. Louis. I did go on to KMOV, which was a CBS station there, and I
Yeah.
was there for 3 years,
mm. And were you reporting and anchoring there?
primarily reporting.
Mm.
Yeah.
Did you go from St. Louis then to Milwaukee, or was there a stop in between
I
there?
went back home to Chicago, and that was
Chicago.
my ultimate goal. I worked
Cool.
for WGN as a freelancer as a
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
per diem. And that was when the industry was really starting to change.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
that was when you didn't necessarily have a photographer that edited your stories. You had writers that would take your video and then edit it, like we do online today.
Mhm.
Mm.
So it was definitely an era that was in transition as it relates to news.
Mhm.
Right.
Because I was per diem, I had an agent that eventually got me a contract, for several years in Milwaukee. And that's
Mm.
how I came to Milwaukee through the ABC station there.
Mm. Did
Yeah.
you have at what point did you get an agent?
I probably secured an agent right after leaving St. Louis. So that
Mm.
was probably after my second, third station.
Okay. As
I
you
really
started getting
wanted
higher and higher in the markets.
right. Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
And then you landed in Milwaukee at WISN, the ABC affiliate there, you were saying. And then so you were reporting, doing some anchoring there as well. I remember seeing you
Yeah.
on air. I had family in Milwaukee and saw you on air, and it was like one of those, oh, it's Kim Dawson, you
Yeah.
know?
I
Right.
know her.
That's where she is now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a reporter for a couple of years here in Milwaukee, and then decided that I didn't want to do it anymore. That
Oh.
Right.
you at some point getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to cover a fire or shooting just gets old. I really didn't want to knock on that door and ask that grieving mother if I could do an interview. You know,
Mm.
Those were
Mhm.
the tough ones.
those
Yeah.
were really difficult. And
Mhm.
it's funny because I remember when I did have to do that, I would go back and I would pray and I would say, please let this story that I'm doing impact our community in some kind of way for the better. And now that I'm on the other side,
Mm.
doing just that
Mm.
by
Yeah.
helping people who have made mistakes account for those mistakes, but change their lives so they don't repeat. those patterns, those habits, those actions.
Is the center where you're working, is it new? Is it unique in the country, or are there other facilities around the country like it?
It is unique, and I think that's because of the leadership here.
Mm,
Um, we have a superintendent that is bold, that has 25 years plus experience, and always said, if I ever get in a position of power one day, I want to do things differently. I want to
mm,
do this, not just lock up people, because research says that alone doesn't work, but to really do the things that can be transformative. So I do think that we are unique. It is the largest county-run correctional facility in the state of Wisconsin,
mm.
and it's really doing some groundbreaking work.
Are you able to track, like, do you track recidivism and how it's helping stop that, or I guess slow it at the very
Absolutely.
least?
I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what I'm doing in my role here. Um, is the superintendent is relatively new, and
Uh-huh.
so she is beginning to track data in a way that they have not before. And
Mm,
as a public relations manager, I'm also capturing those stories.
Yeah.
Uh, that document the journey and the change,
mhm.
6 months, a year, 2 years later.
Are there already stories? I mean, you don't have to use names or anything, but just general stories that you can share of people who have found success leaving the correctional facility and now are well equipped to get along in society.
Absolutely. There's one gentleman that I interviewed that worked for the Milwaukee Bucks with this superintendent. We have a partnership with the Bucks, and they hire them, and they get
Mm,
work experience. Some of the people in our facility have never held a job.
hmm,
So to hear the story about how it impacted their life, how it changed their thinking, how it gave them an opportunity to be a different kind of role model to their children,
hmm,
really empowering and quite moving. I covered a graduation not too long ago, and one of the residents said, this was the first time that he's ever received a certificate of accomplishment for anything.
ah,
Hmm.
So that's when you know you're kind of in the right space.
mhm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
TV and all of the experiences that I had, I definitely believed helped lead me to where I am today.
You get to use some of your news skills too, right? Because even though the way you're talking about it, you said, I covered this, like almost like you're covering a news story. So it's like you get to literally cover these things almost like with your reporter hat on, but then, within the role, your new role at the center.
Absolutely. I see myself as an in-house reporter, or,
Mm,
what they call like a brand journalist.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
I
Uh,
am still a reporter to this day, except I work in this case, for the CRC.
mm-hmm.
When you first left TV, you were done with it at that point. What was that transition like for you at that point? I mean, did you still see yourself? Because I think you went right to the sheriff's department, right? After working at ISN, correct?
That is correct.
And that transition was, what was it hard to do? Was it pretty, did you find that the skills you had developed as a reporter helped you in that transition to the sheriff's department?
Yeah, at that point, I thought the transition was easy. And to
Mm,
this day, I will argue that I think people who have worked in newsrooms make the best public relations practitioners, specifically with a focus in media relations, because we
Mhm.
still think like reporters. We understand their deadlines. We understand that they need something visual to communicate the story. We know how to make the story a, something that is going to be meaningful or valuable to the audience, not necessarily just using it as an opportunity to build brand or talk about how great we are. And
Yeah.
so that made the transition very easy. I remember there were times when we would have spot news, and I do still talk like a reporter. You know, we had unfortunately a officer that was hit by a car, and
Mm.
you know, at one point we didn't know if he was going to make it. Fortunately, he did, but the stations were going live at 11 o'clock, and the sheriff was doing a live press conference. And all of those TV skills that I had developed as a reporter prepared me to get our folks ready to develop the message and provide all the information that would be meaningful to reporters so they could communicate what was happening in our community at the time.
That has been a theme in our podcast is a lot of the people who did move into PR roles for various institutions, whether it's Madison Public Schools, et cetera, they all said the skills you learn as a journalist really translate to other jobs, especially jobs like that when you're on the other side of the microphone.
Exactly. I'll tell you that the challenge came as I um, was moving up in my career and became more strategic.
Yeah.
Mm,
That TV didn't prepare me for.
mm,
Um, and that's when I turned to PRSA, the Public Relations Society of America, to learn
mm.
about strategy, to learn about
Oh.
identifying an audience, to learn about measuring outcomes.
Mm,
You know, people are often quick to say, oh, put out a press release,
mhm,
you know,
Yeah.
and as I learned more about strategy, I was able to backtrack that with folks and say, okay, first let's talk about what your business need is, because media coverage may not be what you need, you
mm,
know, and then, you know, introducing the whole concept of an integrated campaign. You know, just being on TV isn't going to necessarily solve all of your problems.
mhm.
Mhm.
You know, you definitely have to be much more strategic than that. And then, of course, digital disrupted everything.
All
Yeah, I was
right.
gonna say, how much did it change in your time as a, as a public
It's
relations professional? It
amazing.
changed. I can't even imagine how that just changed the landscape you were having to deal with every day.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the last interviews I did, the reporter didn't show up with a photographer at all. All she had
Mm.
was her phone.
Right. Yeah. You see
Wow.
that around here
Isn't that
too.
something?
Yeah.
Huh.
I think the good news, though, is if they can do it and it's good enough
Mm-hmm.
for network affiliated television
Mm-hmm.
stations, then it's good enough for us as business owners, as you know, nonprofits and
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
government institutions. And so that's a lot of my focus now
Mm-hmm.
is helping people harness their own storytelling power.
Well,
Mm.
it's interesting to me, Kim, because as somebody like you and like Carrie, we came up in the television business at a time when like production value was kind of important, right? You wanted the story to look good, you wanted it to sound good, you wanted it to, you know, all flow together and things like that. But it almost seems to me now, and this is what I've heard from some people, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the more authentic and the less produced it is, the more believable it is for some people, at least in the digital world. Or do you find that?
I do think that there's truth in that. I think that people will forgive you for shaky video.
Yeah,
It's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, within some reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
right.
Will not, however, forgive you for poor audio.
Oh.
The
We've
audio
had
is
that.
still going to
I was
be
gonna say
very
episode 1 of Old
important.
News with Dan and Carrie.
You know, if you shake a little bit and, you know, it's not slick in production, that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. as long as I can hear you, and ultimately, as long as I can make that connection,
Yeah. They
that's
want
that's what's
authentic.
important.
Mhm.
Exactly,
Funny
exactly.
side note, I was watching a YouTube video because we're going hiking in Zion National Park this fall. So we were watching a
Fun.
detailed account of one of the scary routes of Angel's Landing. And, so we're watching this couple and they've got their own YouTube channel and, how things auto generate closed captioning. Well, there was one point where the wind was so strong you couldn't hear what she was saying at all. And the auto generated closed captioning was indecipherable words and flailing arms. She was like,
Right.
so when you said that, all I could think of was indecipherable words and flailing arms.
Absolutely. If you have nothing, have the audio for sure.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I had stories like that in the news business that probably would have been deciphered that way as well. So, yeah. Uh, so with the whole digital age now, and are you putting out material then? You talked about like you're an in-house reporter basically, like a brand reporter, so to speak. Are you putting out stories on your digital platforms then?
We are. I have created a couple of videos actually that I shot with my phone and
Mm,
Yeah.
an external mic. And I do a lot of interviewing about the journey for
Hmm.
residents here at the CRC. I'm also capturing stories that highlight the employee experience in an authentic
mm.
way here. Um, so we're just getting started really with that and maximizing that opportunity.
So are you you're editing your own stuff then? What kind of
Yeah,
programs
I
let's
do.
just give people a peek inside of your production process, Kim.
Yeah, so I was really fortunate that in one of my jobs I was trained on Adobe Premiere.
Yep.
Mm.
And so that really took my production quality up a notch.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I also, because I think I started maybe with iMovie or something like that, but
Mhm.
Sure.
Adobe is, state of the art production.
Hmm.
Um, I use that a lot, and then I
Mhm.
also use some of the Adobe apps,
Hmm.
or even Instagram and the editing software on your phone
Mm.
Yeah.
allows you to string, some sound bites together
Mhm.
pretty easily. But my
Mhm.
go-to usually will be Adobe products.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's pretty robust. You can really get a lot out of that. But it is amazing. Carrie and I have kind of learned in the social media, not being a real talented social media user. I have learned though, our past background as editors, using even things such as Edit Star or News Star back in the day to Final Cut and then,
Mhm.
Adobe. It helps knowing that or having some knowledge of that when you're using Instagram or even you know YouTube and those type of things where you
Mhm.
can edit because you kind of understand the process. And what's really maddening to me is all of the kids today know it from like 6 years old on.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I
They didn't
know.
go to school
I
for it.
know.
I know, and as I keep muting myself over here, by the way, if you see my arm reaching, because it's like, first of all, people are walking by, speaking of audio stuff, people are walking by, my dogs are going crazy, and then my son just came bounding up, Mr. Noisy, and like, oh my gosh, I
didn't
need
hear it at
I
all.
need isolation. Oh, good. Well, my subtle muting was doing the job then, so I'll just continue with that.
But that's what makes it authentic,
There you
Mm-hmm.
go.
And I think that I really came to understand the power of using the technology we have in informal ways because I watch YouTube all the time. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I need to know how to put something together, I
Right?
will watch a YouTube tutorial
Yep.
before I'll read directions.
Always. It's so
You
much easier to have some like a teacher in your screen just telling you what to do. We've done that countless times.
But here's my secret passion. I
Hmm,
love perfume, right? And I've gone deep into it. And there
really?
is a whole community on YouTube that reviews fragrances,
Oh.
and it is incredible,
Hmm.
and
Huh.
very helpful for brands and for people who just are looking for the next thing to buy.
Hmm.
And it just shows me how much life is still left in
Mm-hmm.
um, communications, I guess.
Hmm.
Well, and isn't
Yeah.
that the
So many
great, I
ways.
mean, there are a lot of negatives to the internet and to the social media world, but there are a lot of great things like that where you can connect with communities that are interested in the same things you're interested in, and then you learn things from each other. So that's really the power of the digital age, because we hear a lot of the negative, but that's the great part of it, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you're like, oh, I'm not the only one out here who's a nut about perfume, or
Yeah,
some other thing they
yeah.
like to do. Yeah,
So
I
what are
think
your
that's
some of your
cool.
favorite perfumes? What are you wearing these days?
I love, well, I like niche perfume, which is an even smaller community, so you can't necessarily go out to your local department store and get it. But I like a brand called Ormond Jane. That's probably my signature right now.
Your
Mm.
signature scent.
Yeah, Ormond wood.
Mine's Old Spice because
Right.
if my dad wouldn't have worn it, I wouldn't be here.
Well, you know what? If you have the vintage version from back in
Yeah.
the day, you'd get a pretty penny for that these
Oh,
days.
really? See, yeah, that's the other thing, right? There's
Really?
probably
Who knew
collectors
that
and
three
stuff out there.
dollar and 50 cent bottle would be worth hundreds?
So when you left TV, had you already started your family at that point? Was that part of the impetus for you to kind of maybe settle
I
in into the Milwaukee area?
Yeah, I got married and was maybe a couple of years in before I
Okay.
started having kids. But I really wanted to be family first.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely
And
more
so,
friendly hours when you're working more of a PR type of job, I imagine.
Yeah, and then, I think ultimately when you look back at life and you think about what really, really matters, the thing that I'm proudest of is, my kids.
Mm, that's
sometimes.
great.
No, I'm kidding.
True.
There are those days when they can be knuckleheads, but
They
so
can.
Of course,
yeah,
of
right.
course.
Just like us.
That's a
So
whole
then did
other podcast.
That's
right,
right.
exactly. So did you kind of I mean, I imagine at some point, I mean, you had gotten back to Chicago, so were you were you done with that dream of going back to Chicago and living in the Chicago area again? I mean, Milwaukee is where you are now, that area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know what's next necessarily, but Milwaukee is certainly where I am now.
Yep.
Um, it's amazing to me how expensive everything
Mm,
become.
mhm,
And that's maybe one of the reasons why I did not go back to Chicago, because the life that I would want
hmm,
is very expensive.
mhm.
I just think about,
Michigan Avenue,
you know,
Michigan
where
Avenue penthouse, right?
I mean, and then the stressors. Milwaukee, I think, is a much more manageable community. And
Mhm,
certainly for me as a single mom, it was a
mhm,
lot easier to
mm.
manage and have quality of life that I want.
Yeah,
And
Milwaukee's great in the summer. There's so many things to
Oh, it
do, all the
is.
festivals and Summerfest and all that good stuff.
All the
right,
great beer gardens. Yeah.
right.
A lot of great places to hang out in Milwaukee. Milwaukee is really, and we talked to Jamie about this too, because he lives in
Mhm,
that area. I mean, it's a great place to spend time and
mhm,
a great art scene, great music scene. Um, you know, the Third Ward, all of that stuff around there, the parks. It's a great place to live, I think.
mhm.
So I envy you a little bit. But Sun Prairie's great too, so yeah.
You know what? Having lived in so many different places, I really believe that it's about your attitude.
Yeah,
I think that you can be in paradise and not really experience it fully
Oh,
if
yeah.
you're looking for what could be, what should be, or what's coming next.
great
Mhm.
point.
So yeah, I
So
Yeah.
now,
really
speaking
like
of attitude, I'm going to ask you what your worst job was. And I always ask people their worst, their best, and
I
one they
can
might
tell you
still
my
want.
my worst moment in
There you
news.
go. Worst moment. Go for it.
Okay,
Share, please.
so it was at WKOW and Sunday night. So one of the highest newscasts. Everybody's watching the news as they get ready for work Monday morning.
And was that in the days where they always aired the ABC like movie of the week on Sunday night? Was that still happening then?
Probably. Probably. And the
Yeah.
credits were rolling, and then all of a sudden we went to black.
Which is never good in news.
In TV in general, yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, "What the expletive?"
Starting with an F.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Whew.
I looked at Billy, you remember our stage manager? And his eyes were wide, like, and he was like counting down. All of a sudden, the phone started ringing.
Oh
Oh,
no.
ringing, 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 and did not stop. And that
Oh
was like
no.
my first experience with crisis communication. Something clearly wrong here, right? Uh,
Right.
I never did tell my dad about that. Um,
Oh.
but
So your mic was still
I-
live. It went
the
out over the
right,
airwaves,
a hot
unbeknownst to you.
night. And people were, and I remember I did take one call from somebody who was like, I just thought that was it. And I was like, you know what, you're right. And I apologize.
Mm.
And he was like,
Yep.
oh, okay.
Yeah. I think that's
Happens.
the
Stuff
key.
happens.
Yeah.
And again, that's how I coach organizations today when,
Mhm.
they've made mistakes.
Yeah.
You can't run from it. You got to own it and talk about what you're going to do
Well,
to make sure that it doesn't happen again,
Yeah.
make people whole.
Mhm.
and
So
some
that was my
people
worst
will,
moment.
but in those worst moments, some people will actually laugh along with you or emphasize, empathize with you because, there, but for the grace of God go I. A lot of us have done very similar things. In fact, Kim, I think I used the F word with you once in the newsroom. So,
Well, newsrooms were notorious for a
I
lot of things,
apologize.
foul
Yeah.
language included.
Yes.
Well,
And
tensions ran
outbursts,
high,
angry
right?
outbursts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tensions ran high because deadlines were happening and we never had enough resources and it's like
Absolutely.
I had a moment where it's like everything just went sideways and the newscast just ended in disaster and it was like, really? We worked all night and up in the middle of the night to do this. And I remember just like I mean, not on air, but I threw like my stack of strips because I was like, oh my gosh, that was just like an embarrassing disaster. And I remember our sweet, sweet camera guy, he like started picking up my scripts. I'm like, do not pick up my scripts. I will clean up my mess. You are so nice. That's kind of you, but I had the tantrum. I will clean up my scripts.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
uh,
Kim, how about it sounds like you have a job that is very fulfilling and you're doing some things that you really feel good about right now. But is there some other thing, some other job, some other passion you have? Maybe it's perfume that you
mhm,
still would like to that you're still thirsting to do or thirsting for.
Perfume would be one of those things that I'd like to explore. I
Yeah.
love connecting people with fragrances that make them lose their mind,
Hmm.
that make them incredibly happy
Hmm.
and that
Cool.
they never find without me. So
That's
Huh.
that's
cool.
something that I would like to pursue. And there's a lot of storytelling too around perfume now, in how it's sourced and how it makes you feel. So
Hmm.
that is something that I'd like to explore. The other thing that I'd really like to do is travel outside the US,
Hmm.
Yeah.
maybe live abroad.
Ooh.
Um, I'm not sure exactly what I would do yet. I'm open to anything.
I've got an idea. How about you work for a perfume company
Okay.
abroad, connecting customers or running tours as they come in? You connect them. Let's brainstorm.
Watch out, Carrie's
I
on it
got
now.
you.
She's going to be calling you every day she'll have you in Paris in no time.
I love it. I also
Yeah.
like wine
Oh,
and the
me too.
Perfect.
the storytelling
Mm-hmm.
associated with wine, the producers, the family traditions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, maybe you can find something for me like that.
I'm on it. I'm on it. I'm
I
on the
think it's
case.
Italy
interesting.
would be good.
I think it's interesting that you had that story part is important to you because I mean, Carrie might be this way too. I'm this way. My wife and I like to, and I know a lot of people like to look at antiques, but like we like to look at antiques and we only buy things when there is a story behind it. Like
Mhm.
I bought this old house I live in right now because there's a really great story that I like about it, right? So there has to be, if you don't have a story, you don't have anything, right?
I
Mm-hmm.
agree. I agree.
So I think
Yeah.
that that's cool that that's kind of at the base of kind of your interest in perfume and connecting people with it. That's neat.
Well, and it all goes back to your journalism too. I mean, that is storytelling.
And I'll
Yep.
tell you one other thing that I still love that I'm passionate about today, but I wasn't necessarily earlier, photography.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yep.
Still photography, that moves me deeply.
Hmm.
And I really enjoy telling stories with pictures.
Very cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think still photography is really finding its place. I mean, I don't know if it ever went away, but I feel like a lot of people I know are gravitating towards it. And maybe it's because we're bombarded by so many images now that just to look at one and to spend time with one image, I think it's more impactful almost now that everywhere we turn, it's image, 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 and everything is so fast moving.
And I think that's a differentiator, for maybe more experienced storytellers like us. We understand that a good picture is going to grab someone's attention in a very crowded environment.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about what's going to stop somebody mid-scroll, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's just a powerful picture that
Mm-hmm.
is shot from a different perspective or that captures emotion that makes somebody pause and think.
True.
Very
And when we figure
interesting.
that out,
Yeah.
we're going to do it.
That's right. Our old news social media is going to blow up.
Yeah.
I think that's the long and short of it for me. I left news, but news never left me. It
Hmm.
influences everything that I do, I think, to this day.
Do you have a website where people can see the stories that you're working on now in your current role?
Yeah, our website is, if you Google Milwaukee County Community Reintegration Center, you'll find our website.
All right. We'll
And
put a
then
link
That's
in the show
probably easier
notes.
than putting up a web page that people have. Wait, let me write that down.
right,
www.cc.
right. And I'm still new in this role, so we're just building it out. Uh,
Hmm.
Yeah.
the other thing too was I have an Instagram account that I think I'm just gonna make it public because I just want to share stories, and that's
Mm.
You can find me on Instagram at Kim Dawson-Brooks.
I
Cool.
will follow you as soon as we hang up.
Carrie, you'll
Well,
have to show me how to
Kim.
do that, okay?
FaceTime me, I'll show you. Kim Dawson-Brooks, it's been an absolute joy to catch
Yes.
up with you. It's been way too long, and you are just doing beautiful work in this world. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. Um, is that what you call it? A
Yes,
podcast? Video?
that's the lingo. The
I love
podcasts.
it.
We drop a podcast.
It's great
With the
seeing
video element on YouTube. It's a
you. There you
podcast with a
go.
video element.
I do feel honored that you thought enough to reach out and ask me to catch up. We spent some good time together, and
We did.
I will always be grateful that our paths crossed.
And I am grateful. My mentor, Kim, thank you for your patience and your guidance way back in the day.
And look at you today.
Thanks, Kim. See ya.
All right. Thank you, Kim.
Thanks for tuning in to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
That's old news for now.
Join us next time.